Hey everyone, welcome back. This is Peerless. Today we're going to be going over Book 1 from A Song of Fire and Ice series, that is, by Game of Thrones by George R.R. Martin. This book is absolutely incredible. I'm glad I finally picked it up to read it. I started reading this series immediately after the TV series ended. It was one of my favorite TV series ended, and once it dried up and finished with the finale, I was left with a real hole in my life of wanting to find new Game of Thrones content. And even though in Book 1 you're not going to see a lot of new things that weren't in the show, you're absolutely going to be able to go through this and get a lot of enjoyment out of it, I think. If you are a show watcher first who then became a book reader and not the vice versa, you're going to notice that the show's filled in a lot of the blanks in some of the scenes. So every chapter is told through the point of view of a specific character, and due to this, if you're a show watcher instead of a book reader, you're going to notice that the show has filled out a lot of things that aren't in the book just because it's telling it from the point of view of a character who never gets a point of view from the chapter. Cersei's, for example, while she's in the later book, she'll have chapters from her point of view. Nothing in A Game of Thrones is told from her point of view. So every scene we see in the show of her is actually created by D&D themselves, and so they've actually done a really good job in the show of filling in some of the blanks that you are missing in the book here. The pacing of the book is incredible. The dialogue is even better, and you can see why D&D, the showrunners for Game of Thrones, once they ran out of book content to kind of copy off and steal and lift these quotes directly off the pages, the dialogue in particular, as well as the pacing of the series, completely went off the hill. And you can see how George R.R. Martin is the actual person who's completely responsible for the glory of this story, and the showrunners really did nothing more than just take his work and put it to screen, and the things they added themselves just will never compare to what George R.R. Martin put down on the pages. So absolutely, if you love the show, you're going to have to read these books because it's going to give you a real clear indication of why there was such a drop of quality. And hopefully, if he ever does release the last two books, we're going to see a much more satisfying conclusion. Even if the story remains exactly the same, it's going to be done in a much better way, of much better pacing and much better dialogue. And how do you know that for sure? Well, we can actually read the book, watch the show, and do a direct comparison of it. And there is no comparison. The book blows it away in every single aspect, in every single regard. One of the things I've always liked reading through books is that you get to play your own casting director. Even if you want, you don't have to even envision that the characters look as the book describes them. You're your casting director. You can put these things in your head however you want, and that's something usually I really, really enjoyed about reading a book. However, I found reading this book is very odd to go into it, and almost every single character, because they have a show counterpart, is this well fleshed out person. I can see their outfits, I can see their hairstyles, I can see the room, I can see the entire country and this fictional world of Westeros that they're living in with clarity. It's all pictured in my mind because I'm pulling these things from the actual TV series themselves and not having to create it in my head. And then I can actually contrast that by any time the book introduces a character who does not make his way in the TV series. It's almost this very worn down 2D version of someone very gritty with minimal features standing next to, Ed Stark. He was played by Sean Bean, of course. So here's this famous actor who's completely fleshed out, almost every contour and turn of his face and the length of his hair, the color and everything. You almost feel like you could smell the person. And he's going to be standing next to someone that you've kind of barely fleshed out because the mind isn't that great of creating new faces and whatnot. So that's very interesting to, at some points, have this incredibly crystal clear view of the world, and at other points, because it's being introduced to you through the book, it's going back to you're your own casting director, you're your own set designer, and what these people are you've created for them. So actually, I'm very glad I had watched the show first, because going through this with such a clear vision in my mind almost felt like I was watching the TV show as I read through the pages, and that's something that's really incredible to experience. If you're unfamiliar with the book series or the television series, I don't want to dive into the plot too much, as this is fiction and not nonfiction, as the books we're usually going to be going over. I don't want to dive too much into the story about it. Just the general overview is we're going to be seeing a lot of plots. A king's going to come visit his old friend. He's suspected a murder plot is afoot, and he's going to require him to leave his home, leave his family, and come to the kingdom with him. In this case, it's called King's Landing. And from there, everything's going to break off in a bunch of subplots breaking off of families against families. Also drawing from some historical context, but you don't need to know the history of England and the War of the Roses in order to appreciate any of this. It's all broken off. It's a fantasy world. It's fiction. It's created all on its own. There are so many twists and turns in this. I do not want to spoil absolutely anything for you. If you're lucky enough enough to not know what's coming onto the screen or onto the pages. I don't want to be the one to spoil it for you, but I absolutely will tell you it's 100% worth the read, 100% worth the time. The series is going to pull you in, and this book does an absolutely amazing job of drawing you in. Basically, the book is exactly season 1 of the Game of Thrones. The entire show is named after the book, and rightfully so, because to me this is probably the best book of the series. It goes into incredible detail of everything and does an absolutely wonderful job of building this world up from scratch. Every other book has all of these established people, established characters to go with. Book 1 is starting off everything from scratch, starting it all off in your mind, and I think it's absolutely amazingly done. So that's going to be it for today. Like I said, this is A Game of Thrones by George R.R. Martin, book 1 of the Song of Fire and Ice series. We're going to be going over for the other books as we go along here, and I'll see you next Friday with a new video. Peace out.